Hi, Whiskey Ringers. I hope you're all well and enjoying the podcast. As always, I welcome any thoughts, suggestions, and feedback you have to make the podcast better, and, of course, any suggestions you have for guests you'd like to see. I wanted to share with you a new way to participate in the Whiskey Ring Podcast Bottle Share Club. There are several people who have reached out to me about being put on a waiting list for the top tier. After much thought, I've decided to open that tier up to more people. If you have been hesitating, or if you are a current supporter wanting to level up, reach out to me at david@whiskeyandmyweddingring.com or through social media or Patreon, and I'll be happy to help you move up. I also wanted to send a special thanks to my current $25 a month patrons, who have agreed not only to this change, but who have been truly irreplaceable supporters of this and who make this podcast happen. Thank you to all of you in no particular order. I'm talking to you, Ken, Jesse, Jim, Bill, Don, and John, Yana, Connor, Zach, Scott, Ollie, Steve, and Jake. Without your support, this podcast wouldn't be happening anymore. And thank you for helping me to keep the lights on and keep guests coming to you every week. As always, you could support the podcast for as little as $1 a month, with ad-free episodes starting at $5 a month. This support is the reason the lights stay on, and to make sure the podcast and website are the best they can be. Thank you to all who are already patrons, and I hope to have more listeners join soon. Visit patreon.com/whiskeyandmyweddingring to join today. Without further ado, here's a new episode of the Whiskey Ring Podcast. Hey folks, welcome to a new episode of the Whiskey Ring Podcast. Today, we are doing the first of a 3-part series, which I'm incredibly excited to do. Some of you may have remembered I was able to visit the new Bhakta campus up in Poultney, Vermont, back in February. Got to go with a couple of whiskey friends from the New York City community, meet some national spirits writers and such, and we spent a few days there. And we got to really explore the idea of what Bhakta Spirits is creating, what they want to create, what they've already got on hand, which is some incredible Armagnac and whiskeys and spirits. And so I wanted to come back there and dig a little deeper with some of their star players. So to kick us off, I want to introduce Johnathan Page. He is Bhakta's Minister of Time. And we're going to jump in. Goes by JP. So JP, welcome on.
Thank you, David. Excited to be here. Star player. I really like that. I'm a star player of Bhakta. That's got a nice ring to it.
You were with us for a bunch of time while we were up there, and especially kind of some of the most exciting points too. So I would consider a star player.
I agree with you totally, David. I definitely am a star Bhakta. It's just nice to hear someone else say it now, perhaps. But yeah, we definitely did have a lot of fun. You and I had some fun in our library. Yeah, we had some fun on here.
Yeah. So we've got a bunch of topics to talk about, but I wanted to start just with your own personal journey. And you can, I've got the starting point as you starting as a Whistlepig intern in 2017, but I'll open it to you to go as far back as you want in terms of your spirits journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Whistlepig is a good place to start, not just with, the gentleman that started the company, Raj, but also myself. So I'll give you kind of the precursor on how that internship came to be. It was pretty random. So I went to the University of Florida, grew up in Florida all my life. I had a month-long internship when I was going into my second year of university, and just kind of filling it up with odd jobs here and there for the remaining 2 months of the summer. And a family friend of mine who ran a finance office that Raj was part of it at one point. And she calls me and she says, "Hey, Johnathan, there's this guy. His name is Raj. He owns this whiskey company. He lives in Vermont. He's a very, eccentric guy. You'd probably like him. Basically, he needs someone to drive his dog and his car from Florida to Vermont, a minivan and a German Shepherd to fly it back. Easy job, right?" So I said, "Yeah, no, that sounds great. I'd love to. I'll do it." So I go and I pick up a German Shepherd and a minivan, which a minivan is a great car. David, I know you're having a daughter here soon. So keep that in mind. One of the best utility vehicles that exists is the minivan. But basically, I take this minivan and this German Shepherd all the way up to Vermont, and I end up on this whiskey facility. At the time, Whistlepig didn't even have any signs. So I'm driving around hoping I'm in the right place. My GPS is like floating around a bulb, thinking I'm in the right place. Finally, I get there and out pops Raj Bhakta. We end up going for a walk. We're looking over the Whistlepig farm at one point on this big giant hill, and he looks at me and he says, kid, you don't seem too bad. And I said, Raj, sir, you don't seem too bad yourself. And he chuckles and he says, why don't you come work for me? I said, absolutely. He's like, you can live here, you'll work here, I'll pay you, and we'll figure everything else out. How's that sound? I said, sure. Sounds good to me. He says, when do you want to start? I said, I don't know, maybe like a week. He's like, a week. Yeah, that's perfect. I've got another car in Florida. You drive that thing up here, we'll figure everything else out. So a week later, I bring up Raj's CTS V Sport, which was a car that we did ship over to France, which we can talk about at a little later time. And as soon as I entered the property, I became Raj's personal intern. I did everything from work with the hospitality team on the farm stay program to working in the warehouse with the bottling team, the distilling team. That's where I met Pete Lynch, actually, the former master distiller and blender at Whistlepig, and now who's a part of our property. I know you'll be speaking with him a little later. But I did a little bit of everything and just got to know Raj over the course of the summer. I mean, I was 19 years old, living in the middle of nowhere. I didn't have a car. So in my free time, I hung out with guests, where I hung out with Raj, and we got to know each other. And that was really my introduction to the spirits industry as a whole. Admittedly, I remember the first time I tasted Whistlepig, it wasn't the most wasn't a pleasant experience, let's say. As my drinks of choice prior were more of a whiskey Coke or a vodka Sprite, not a single 100 proof whiskey neat.
Understood. And the with being Raj's personal intern, doing all these things, but getting to touch the hospitality side, the sales, all these different areas while at Whistlepig, there was obviously a transition point where Raj departed the company. Did you remain with Whistlepig after that?
No. I went home that summer. I went back to university. Raj and I had become friends over the summer. Again, there was me and Raj hanging out pretty much in my free time, but it was a good introduction to the spirits industry. To be honest, David, I was actually studying chemistry and wanted to become a doctor when I first met Raj. All throughout high school and my early days in university, I was studying chemistry, I was shadowing physicians, and I wasn't really my eyes weren't open, into the world of business. And when I met Raj, that's when the gears started to change. And when I got back to school, things started to shift in my mind personally. But as that transition happened from Whistlepig to what is now Bhakta, I moved along with Raj. So we'll fast forward a couple of months. I went back to school. Raj continued on with his business. We were going into the next year, which was 2018. And I remember I get a phone call from Raj. I was home for winter break. I was with one of my buddies. We're driving down to a beach somewhere doing God knows what. And Raj calls me. And I remember I put it on speaker. I was like, Anthony, you're going to love this guy. I was like, Raj, a big character. You never know what's going to come out of his mouth. Like anytime he calls, it's always a blast. And he's got something interesting to say. So I pick up the phone. I put it on speaker. I'm like, hey, Raj, it's Johnathan. You're on speaker with my buddy right now. How are you? What's going on? And David, you've met Raj. So, you'll understand. He says, Johnathan, I've got this idea. And I'm like, oh, tell me about it, Raj. He's like, no. What are you doing this summer? Well, I'm looking at some different internships. I'm starting to apply for a couple of things. He's like, no. Don't do any of that. Don't do anything. I need you. You got to come to France with me. Come to France. We're going to France. I'm like, going to France? He's like, no. I'll pay you to go to France. I'll pay you to come to France with me. And I was like, what would you say at that, David? I'm like, yeah. Sure, we'll go to France. Like, what are we working on? He's like, I don't have time to talk about it right now, but we're going to go to France. I'll call you. And then hangs up the phone. This is no more than a 60-second conversation about the plan for the summer was France. Now, I found out afterwards that that was the plan, to go discover Armagnac, go look at the French spirits and look at everything kind of in the very broad scope, right? Since when Raj sold Whistlepig, he started traveling the world looking at some old spirits, every category possible, every country. I mean, one of the first things that he bought was a Jamaican rum that he found in Canada. That would be a fun one to talk about at some point, or maybe with a colleague. But then he was off to France, and he had this whole France adventure that we're going to look at everything under the sun. And that's when things really started to get started for Bhakta in that particular space.
And we should mention that's the 1990 rum,
That is the
right?
1990 rum. Yeah.
And I've got to say, when we tried a lot of great spirits on that visit, and I think of the Armagnacs, probably the 62 was my favorite, followed shortly by the 73. But honestly, I came out with that rum being the top spirit for me. It was just so good. Um,
There's nothing
but
like that rum.
no, no. And I meant to bring my bottle in here, but it's a blend of two different distilleries, Clarendon and
Appleton.
Appleton. Thank you. And a 20 plus age statement. It's just some great stuff. And as you said, so it's a one off. It's found in Canada, had it. You're not going to get it again, because neither Appleton nor Clarendon are selling stocks that old anymore to anyone. So it really is a one off that won't be seen again. And it's one of those products that I just keep talking about. And I know for listeners, they'll know I don't promote, in a sense, products that much on the podcast. I'll say something's good. I'll say I really enjoyed it. Here are the tasting notes for it. That's one of the ones I would make an exception for it just being that different, that exciting to take a look at. But so at this point, Raj, and yeah, in his typical way, the 60-second conversation, he's got the idea, he wants to run with it. And Raj, if nothing else, is very much the idea guy. And so you're in France.
Yeah, so fast forward, we're in France. We brought over an Escalade. We brought over a Cadillac CTS V Sport so that we can continue our American ways, let's say, and make big, bold Bhakta statements throughout Europe. But anyways, so we fast forward. We're over in France. We had started looking at Armagnac already. Raj, one day puts this. I remember my first meeting with him. We were still in America. He puts a bottle of Armagnac on the table and he says, "You got to try this Armagnac." I maybe had been drinking a little bit the night before, and was like, "Raj, I don't know what Armagnac is. It may make me yak. I don't, I don't know exactly, but let me get familiar with it." And so I familiarized myself with it. We're over in France. We're evaluating stocks. We're looking at different business models for Armagnacs. We're looking at companies that have products in America. What are the price points? What are the availability? Just trying to get a full understanding of the Armagnac market, worldwide and specifically in America. And so, throughout the course of this, let's say early summer days, we're doing a lot of product testing, evaluation, quality control. Some people call it drinking, others call it business. And after one too many business sessions, let's say, on the front porch of this beautiful house we were in a chalet 9,000 feet up in the air with a pregnant Dan He, which is Raj's wife. I'm sure, David, you know all about pregnant wives, excuse me, and what tendencies may or may not come out of them, especially when you put them 9,000 feet up in the air with a little bit of altitude sickness, and your husband and his right-hand man doing a lot of product testing, drinking, we'll call it, on the front. Basically, she has enough, and she says, "I'm done with it." Some things sound like a story, and some things are just hard to believe. But David, I kid you not, we're sitting on the porch. looking over the mountains. And next thing you know, I see my boss, Mr. Raj Bhakta, getting chased out of the house with his wife with a broomstick. Like if you look in one of our product books in the Bhakta 50, it shows this story of how Raj gets kicked out of the house. It happened. I was there. I'm sitting there with a glass of wine in my hand. Like, what is going on right now? Raj is like, oh, yep, all right. I'm getting kind of kicked out. He looks at me, David. He says, JP, hold down the fort. I'm like, hold down the fort. Yeah, I got it. I'll hold down the fort. I'll hold down the fort. And he grabs his bag. He's like, I'm going to pick up my friend Leo from the airport. Our journey's getting expedited. You got this. And I'm like, yeah, I got this. I'm good. Yeah, of course. Now, my saving grace, David, we had a 14 passenger stick shift van. This was before the Escalade and before the Cadillacs got there. And I knew I was the only one that knew how to drive it besides Raj. So I wasn't going to go home because I had to feed the family. Someone had to go to the grocery store down, 6,000 feet where the grocery store is and then drive 6,000 feet back up, to hit that 9,000 foot mark or whatever. So I knew I was okay, but I'm still pretty scared of Dan He, at the time as she just threw her husband out of the house. And so while this is all happening, Raj is driving over to pick up his co-founder or legal advisor, good friend, Mr. Leo Gibson. And I get this call a couple hours later. And Raj, again, another 60-second call. The important facts get spit out, nothing extra. JP, I'm headed to Armagnac. I've just picked up Leo. We're going to be there in a couple of days. I need you to pull up every Armagnac producer that exists. I need you to tell me which ones have products in America. I need you to tell me which ones are doing well in America. I need a plan for me to visit all of them, make sure it's a good location. You have an hour. Go. Hangs up the phone. I have an hour. What do you mean? This is already like a pretty big task going up, pulling every single Armagnac producer that exists known to man. But then you have an hour. So I'm like, got an hour. Again, we've been doing a little product testing. I'm a little nervous already. So I'm start to, punch in the computer, looking at all my different spreadsheets, trying to pull all these things together. And I'm like, all right.
And not to interrupt the flow of the story there, but I want to highlight this because Armagnac, we've hit upon it a little bit in other episodes in the past, but this is where we're really going to get into it, is that it's not like cognac or bourbon or really any other spirit where you've got the massive houses that either blend or make their own stuff and have tons of stock. These are mostly farm by farm by farm houses with some stocks. A couple years ago, you're going to have maybe, I don't know, a couple brands that are in the US, a couple companies with product in the US. So at once you have this task in front of you with an hour, but you've also got basically like find everyone who's creating Armagnac. That's going to be a lot of different farms and homesteads around that area of France. So with that, please continue.
No, I mean, I think that's a great point. You've got people, some make barrels, some are in the wine business, some produce one cask, some it's their business. And I'll tell you, David, my saving grace was the BNIA, which is basically Bureau of Armagnac. Bureau of Armagnac, and maybe you talk to Pete a little bit more, our master blender, about what that organization is or depth. But basically, they manage the Armagnac region. Every year, you've got to submit weights to them. You've got to submit what production you've done. You've got to submit what you've sold to them. You got to give them all the details so that they can track it, right? If you look at our cellars specifically, right, we've got products that date back to the 1800s, 1868 being the oldest spirit in our collection. How do you verify that? The BNIA. You've got to have an organization that tracks this thing, right? So my saving grace was them, right? I had been doing a little bit of research. I went off on a whim and I'm like, they probably have all this information already listed. They track this. This is their day job. Let me see if I can get someone on the phone. See if they'll give this information to me as, an American who's trying to just find a little bit more about Armagnac. And, again, we wanted to study it. We sell it now. We really understand it. And so basically I get on the phone with the BNIA. I find someone who speaks a little bit of English, enough English for us to get the points across. We both had Google Translate open on the other side. And I'm describing to her that I need this list of Armagnac. And she's like, she's so stoked. I don't think she's ever had someone ask for it. She's like, absolutely, we have this. I would be happy to give it to you. What's your email? David, probably 15 or 20 minutes of that phone call were us just trying to get the email back and forth across, trying to send each other an email just because we couldn't quite get the accent with the WhatsApp connectivity because I'm in the Alps and she's in the middle of nowhere, Armagnac, and we're trying to figure this out. But finally, she sends me this list. She's actually done a little bit of consulting for us in the past. This individual, which was very like serendipitous, if you will, a couple of years later to come back to it. But anyways, I get this list sent over to me. It has everything that I've needed. It's taken all my work and compiled it into one on the locations and the producers of Armagnac. Now I'm scrolling through this list. And we're having a little bit of fun. David, this part, I don't know if you want to cut or not. You kind of tell me. I'm going to tell the story, and then I'll let the PR people, you guys decide. Sometimes it hits, sometimes it doesn't with the listeners. But anyways, I get this list and I'm now feeling pretty confident, right? I've got 15 minutes to spare. I've got the list of Armagnac. I've got everything that Raj needs. I've got, down to producers with the owners and so on and so forth. So I'm looking at this list and I'm like, all right, well, where do I send Raj? And I'm looking at the Armagnac area as a whole. Now, to our listeners, there are 3 sub-regions of Armagnac, the center one being Tenareze. And I'm like, all right, so I got to send him to the center. So I'm going to pick the Tenareze region. So I'm scrolling down, I'm looking at all the different producers, and I see this town. Now, keep in mind, I'm a 20-year-old college student at the time. I've gotten to know Raj fairly well. So we've gotten on a pretty good, back and forth basis. So I think I'm going to play a little bit of a joke on him. Got a little prank for Raj. Now, what is my prank? Well, I keep seeing the word condom on the condom France. Now I looked it up and it was condom France, but as an American, you see the word condom France. And I found this chateau that had these super old spirits, and it was in the dead center of Armagnac. And I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna play a little joke on Raj and tell him to go to condom France. So I send Raj over this list. He receives it. I call him up. I'm like, Raj, you've got everything you need. 5 minutes to spare. He says, great, JP. Thank you so much. What do I type in my GPS? Now, again, I'm 20 years old. I've got a little bit of a rapport with Raj. I think I'm going to do something funny. I'm like, Raj, you want to go to Condom France? He says, what? I want to go where? Condom France, like CONDOM France, the thing you forgot to use with the next child. And he's like, well, I know what it is. I know what it is. Now, quit screwing with me. Now we're talking about a multi-million-dollar business. I need somebody, and this is not appropriate. I'm going to send you home. And I'm like, Raj, did you look at my email? No, I didn't look at your email. I'm sitting on the phone with you. You got to tell me where to go, and you're lying to me. You're not telling me where to go. Keep in mind, he just got kicked out of his house too, so his spirits aren't, as best of.
There's a little sensitivity there for sure.
Little sensitivity. I'm cracking jokes on the pregnant wife already, and he says, no, I didn't look at your list. And I'm like, Raj, I don't know what to tell you, man. My hands are tied. Like, I'm telling you where to go. You won't look at my list. You have everything you need. I don't know what to say. It goes dead silent. At that point, I got a little nervous. I'm like, you're playing with a multimillionaire who's a businessman who probably doesn't want to hear some 20-year-olds, BS. Dead silent. Then I start to hear and listeners, if you can't hear that, I'm banging on my phone with my finger, really just typing in my passcode very quickly. And sure enough, it goes dead silent again. And I start to hear like, oh, Leo, it's a thing. It's a thing. We're going to Condom. Bhakta's going to Condom France. We're going. And they burst, and you can hear the cackling and the screaming. I mean, they finally, the joke hit. Took a little time, but the joke finally hit. And Raj says, thank you, hangs up the phone. And they find themselves in Armagnac. Now, while he's there, that's when the discovery of the Riz du Perron Chateau happened, which was on my list of Armagnac producers to visit. And basically, he gets to this area of Condom, France. There are some beautiful producers there, Jeannot, Riz du Perron, to name a few. And as Raj starts to get familiar with the area, he hears about this family, right? The Riz du Perron family. And there was a legend of the area that they supposedly had a collection of Armagnacs that didn't just date back to, let's say, the 1900s, 100 years ago, but it really dated back even further, back to the 19th century, right? Stuff from the 1800s, 1868 being the oldest, 1897, 1888, stuff that from a whiskey consumer, right? Think of Raj's background for a second. Think of your background, maybe my background. It started with whiskey, right? So to hear about some whiskey that's 50 years old, 60 years old, 100 years old, or a spirit, excuse me, that's that old, that dates back to 150 years old, like that's going to raise the eyebrows. And that's where this first piece of discovery, let's say, because after Raj heard about that, he's like, great, we're going to show up. We're going to go knock on his door and see if it's true or not. And sure enough, it was. That's really where this discovery of Armagnac began, from the legend of Armagnac, the Riz du Perron family.
And I want to jump back just for a second to Raj's wife, Danhi, who is she was part of our hosting team on the campus. Lovely, met her sister as well, and I could see definitely that she's a very strong woman for sure, but she's also very warm and welcoming and generous. And it's funny to me the juxtaposition of that image that I have of her with that one of her like having a broomstick and chasing Raj out of the house. I could see it happening, but it's still a very funny image in my mind. Uh,
Me too, David. I look at her sometimes and I'm like, man, I'll never cross you.
no,
Warm,
you
warm and fuzzy on the front.
the iron lady on the inside, just whenever you need it. Um, so it's no, but that's the fun of with. This is a side note with talking to producers and talking to people in the industry. We rarely get into the personal side of things because obviously some people will think it's inappropriate. Some people think keep it just on the business side, and for the most part, I totally agree. Like I don't involve my wife in my podcasting or anything like that. Not really for any other purpose than she's just not interested. But the in this case, because of who Raj is and because of how the story evolved, it's important to keep in mind the family aspect. Having the wife, having now, not sure how many kids he had at the time. I think he's got 5 now.
Got 5 now,
5
4
now.
4 then.
Yeah. So he's very much a family man, enjoys time with his family. You can see it when he's with them that he really enjoys it. And so in that sense, if you're listening and you're wondering why bring up that aspect of his life, again, normally I wouldn't, but I think in this case it is appropriate. He doesn't shy away from it, and we won't dwell on it too much, obviously. But that was just a side note that I wanted to address as it came into my mind. So you're in France, and you're Raj is going to Condom. He's finding the Riz du Perron, and you're finding these casks that not only you've got spirit from 1868, but spirit that's still maturing from 1868, and of course other vintages since then. Now, restating what you just said, for a whiskey drinker or really any other spirit, that's out of the realm of possibility. Even the highest age scotches we've seen are going maybe 71 or 2 into the 80s, and basically in fully inert casks for that entire time. It's the only way they survive for that long. But Armagnac is its own beast, its own type of spirit. And I wanted to take a detour for a second here, if you feel comfortable doing so, to have you explain a little bit about what Armagnac is and how it can stand that kind of aging.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a great question for those of us that haven't necessarily got into Armagnac yet. But we can definitely talk about that. One point I will make though on Dan He, as I'm glad you know brought that up, and the family with the spirits business as a whole, is or these 2 points, and I'll cover them quickly, and then we'll dive into Armagnac first. Just Dan He Bhakta as a whole. I mean, she is instrumental not only in, you know, helping keep things together here with this current company, but at Whistlepig too. And so she was a very big part of Whistlepig. She launched the Farm Snake program. She really helped build the business up, which is why she is part of the conversation. So much so that when Raj sold the company, and when he was looking at creating the new brand, what's he going to name it? Well, he named it after himself. Why? So that he can create a family brand, right? Something that he can pass down to, you know, his one of his, you know, 5 children, or all of them, so that it's a little bit more meaningful and not so, you know, necessarily whimsical. Which is a fun, you know, thing to be a part of. When I look at the Bhakta family, you know, they're my second family, right? And that makes it a fun working environment. We've had our sales team, our new sales team, current sales team come up over the past week, and everybody feels, you know, like family, which for some people, for some companies, great. For others, it doesn't necessarily work. But, you know, those family values that Raj instills, you know, within his family and within the business, I really think help differentiate ourselves as a you know, a different and fun workplace environment, you know, when you look at it. But now on to the Armagnac. Talk about the aging of the Armagnac. I mean, yeah, Armagnac is a very, very interesting thing. We found spirits, to your point, that were still aging in French oak when Raj purchased it, right? This property, this adventure, this business took over 2 years of negotiations for Raj to work out with Mr. Duperron, right? You know, Mr. Duperron, this chateau and these spirits have been in his family for 5 generations. So to let something, you know, like that go, that's a little bit emotional on top of a little bit of business. So it took a little bit of, you know, it took a little bit of time. But after those 2 years, Raj finally gets the keys. We start looking into everything. We had spirits from the 40s, 1946 particularly, one of my favorites. It had been sitting in wood for over 70 years. And we're looking at this thing. We're like, all right, we got to take it out right now. So we know what we got to take it out. We'll see what's happening. Turns out it's my favorite vintages we have. Next time you're up here, David, make sure you ask for the 1946. It's one hell of a year. But it aged for over 70 years. And to your point, you look at a Scotch, you look at a Macallan 70 and Macallan 80, goodness knows what you're going to pay for that, certainly in the 6 figures, maybe even higher. But Armagnac is a little bit different. Now, why? Armagnac is made to age. Why isn't that spirit, you know, screwed up after, you know, sitting in wood for 70 years, right? You think it'd probably just be kind of sappy and sticky and, you know, you're bitter and you're not really sure what you're going to get. But Armagnac,
if there's anything left,
right? If there's anything left, right? But Armagnac is made to age. And so what I mean by that is when the product first comes off the still, it may be a little bit more, it may be a little rougher around the edges, right? Why? So that after 5 years, after 10 years, after 20 years, after 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years in some cases, that then the product is ready to drink, right? The barrels, they're toasted, they're not charred, so they've got a little bit less, you know, juice being pushed into them in terms of the flavor from the barrel. The spirit itself is typically distilled one time. So, you know, when you look at spirits that are, you know, say vodka distilled 4 times, 8 times, 16 times, they're trying to clean the spirit up. They're trying to clean the spirit up. When we look at Armagnac, you're taking flavor away when you do such a thing, right? And we don't necessarily want to do that. So it's okay if it's a little bit, you know, rougher around the edges when it comes off, but it's made to sit in those barrels for a while. The way that I like to look at it, and this is a fun analogy, is the wild racehorse, right? When you get a racehorse and it's wild, the trainer can't, you know, it throws one trainer off, it throws another trainer off. It's buck wild. You can't race it, but you're like, if I can finally get this thing going, this is going to be the winner, right? And then you find that one particular guy, that one particular trainer that's able to do it. And after time, after 1 year, after 6 months, 1 year, after time and time and time again, you finally hone that one in. Again, they were wild in the beginning. They were uncontrollable. But once you're able to put those blinders on, once you're able to focus them and give them the time that they need, that's your winning racehorse. And that's what Armagnac is, right? It needs time to be worked on. It needs someone to beat it up. It needs to be in wood for 10, 20 years before it's ready to start drinking. Which is, again, just something that you don't see. You've got different types of cellars, the wet cellars, the dry cellars. So you're controlling what evaporates off. Like that 1946 is, for over 48% alcohol. Like that's pretty high for sitting in wood for 70 years.
Yeah, definitely.
Like that's pretty high. I think it's actually, it may have broken 50. We'll have to confirm that, but it's up there. And that's, one of the beautiful pieces about Armagnac.
And as much as that is for Armagnac, that's a high growth rate in terms of the ABV. So you can look at it two ways: the growth of the ABV or the reduction of water. Same result, but different ways to look at it. It's remarkably slow as well. So as we joked about, like if you find something like a barrel that's gone 10 years in Texas for a bourbon, let's say, you're looking at syrup at best, dust at worst. There's just nothing left in there. But obviously with that, you've got a very active cask, you've got new casks, charring, usually toasting as well to some extent, and also a smaller cask not by law, but a smaller cask by comfort level, let's say. People use the 53-gallon casks. And when you're aging the Armagnac, you were alluding to this, it's totally different scenarios. You're aging in cellars, in sometimes in caves.
Yeah. And we didn't even talk about the cask size. I think that's a great point.
Yeah.
53 gallons, which is around 200 liters. Armagnac, we start at 400 liters, so double the size of a whiskey barrel, right? So you've got less surface area being affected by the wood, right? Or being touched. So you think about that, 400 liters, right? Now we've got barrels that are 5,000 liters, right? So even bigger, right? We've got barrels that, in some sizes are, 12 feet high. So much so that, a little kid can run around on top and say, "Hey, how are you guys?" from the top of this barrel. Roger's son Ethan did that at one point. It was, very cute, but you're amazed. You're like, he's 12 feet up in the air with, Armagnac underneath him on this barrel. That's crazy. Some of the other pieces about the casks themselves, and we kind of alluded to this when we were talking about the production of Armagnac. For some people, this is their everyday business. They're producing Armagnac, they're using Armagnac. It's, they're buying and selling. Maybe they have a brand, maybe they're doing it in bulk. But the other people, some are just small farmers. Maybe they produce 1, 2, 3 casks a year. Maybe they don't have enough money to buy a new cask every year. When you look at, Armagnac aging from like a traditional standpoint, when it comes off the still, it'll go into a newer barrel for the first resting period. Then it goes into an exhausted barrel, right? What does that exhausted barrel mean? Well, it really depends. It could be 50 years old. It could be, 20 years old. I'm sure you saw some of the casks that we brought back over to America. Some of those casks were 50 years old, 60 years old, right? So they've gotten a little less to give if you're thinking about it in terms of, the barrel, right? Because it's been used for different Armagnacs. Now, for us, that's a beautiful thing because now we're only getting what we want out of it, or it's happening over a slower period of time. So we can test it, whether it's every day or every month, do a little taste of it until we get that particular product. And so when you're starting to deal with the cask sizes, the cask, toastings, which ones have been used, all those different factors, then you dive into the cellar, the cave, how wet is it? How dry is it? What's the temperature? What's the average temperature? Average temperature in Condom, France is much lower than it is in, like we were just talking about, say, Texas. Drastically different. So, what you're getting on the outline is it's really different. And that's, one of the reasons actually, David, that we love vintage, right? The idea of vintage, Bhakta is a preeminent house of vintage spirits, right? It started with Armagnac, but it's expanded into so much more. Now we got that idea from Armagnac, because when you taste the 62 versus the 63 versus the 73 versus the 83 versus the 1941, they're all wildly different. Right now, for us, I think there's a couple more reasons that go into it, not just the casks and the aging, but we were built on a family of negociants, right? A family of collectors, right? The Riz de Perron family, for 5 generations, we're traveling around the whole Armagnac region, buying and selling, some in big quantities, some in small quantities. Some stuff they were hoarding. And I thank God that they did, because we wouldn't have had this some of these crazy vintages if they were just selling it all. I appreciate them for it. You know what I mean? It's really a beautiful thing. But what does that allow us to do? Now we're not just getting our own flavors, right, from Tenareze or from, say, the Baz Armagnac region, but now we're getting flavors from everybody, right? People that produce Armagnac for their business, people that may be in the wine business and produced an extra cask because they had it, and now they're ready to cash in to make a couple of bucks back, right? And we found it, and then we held on to it, right? So we're getting that level of differentiation from the where it's coming from itself, and then you've got your own house style on top of it, right? We have our own we've got a master blender over there, we've got a cellar master in France as well, and then we've got our American team that's also playing into it from their knowledge on different spirits as well. But that allows us to hit every taste profile possible, which is one of my favorite things about Armagnac, or just, again, vintage spirits in general. I remember I got a call a couple of weeks ago from an account in Boston. We'll call it out the Elephant Walk in the South End. He calls me. He's like, "Hey, I'm interested in some Armagnacs. I hear you have Armagnacs." I'm like, "Oh, we have much more than just Armagnacs." I was like, "We're gonna need to do 2 tastings though." He says, "Why?" I said, "Well, I got to learn what you like and don't like, and then I'll bring you the full set." And so he's like, "Oh, excellent." So I go in, we taste some Armagnacs. We're tasting the 73, the 96, the 97, which is a great year, by the way, the 1997 Armagnac. It's my personal year. So I have fun pouring it. Anyways, we go through this tasting, and he's like, "All right, I like this. I like this. This is, I like the heavy. I like the light." And we talked about the beverage program, and I'm like, "All right, see you in a couple of days. Be ready for this tasting." And he's like, "Okay, sure." I go in. Next day, I bring in like 2 giant boxes. They're full of 50 mLs. You can't see it, maybe like a foot by a foot wide, full of 50 mLs, all different spirits, all different price points, all different taste profiles. And I walk into his restaurant. He's like, "What do you have?" I'm like, "The next hour of our lives, right here, sir." I put it down. I slapped them on the table. We taste everything from, I think our oldest one may have been either the 41. I think it was the 41, because that one's in our 1928 blend that we wanted to taste, which is similar to the 46, very heavy, very whiskey-esque, if you will, aged for 65, 70 plus years. Upper edge of the price point that we're looking for consumers. And then we dove into the 62, which you've tasted, a little bit lighter, which still has, I'll use the word like whiskey-esque notes for our listeners, which is like vanilla, caramel, touch of oak, but it still had very floral notes, still had a lot of prune and apricot in there, which is very that plays very well, if you will, with those whiskey excellence, a little bit lighter, right? And then we had our 73, which is like an Armagnac made for a whiskey, for any brown spirits lover. A 79, unhinged, very caramel, very vanilla forward, like dark cherries in there. All the way up to some very light Armagnacs that are reminiscent of more traditional styles. We went on this full tasting, and by the end of it, he selected 4 or 5 Armagnac vintages for his bar, but he's like, "Man, that was crazy. We just tasted 15 different Armagnacs from all different years, and you had more coming, and you just took me on a taste profile journey that I don't think I've ever gone before. We hit everything from stuff that I didn't think an Armagnac tasted like to stuff I thought an Armagnac tasted like. You threw some curveballs in there just for fun, and I mean, I didn't know it could be like this. Like, I had an idea, but to sit here and taste, the 90, one versus the 1990 is like 60.1 alcohol by volume, and the 92 is much lower, a little bit more reminiscent, a little spicier, but he's like, "This is crazy." And that's, part of the beauty of Armagnac and aging, that you don't always find in other spirits. Of course, there are differentiations within spirits categories, but to me, that's one of the most profound things that I've personally experienced, and that our customers and our guests here on campus, and whether in the market or at a bar or restaurant or retail store, they experience it too. They're like, "Whoa, this is nuts! I didn't think they'd be that different." And you're like, I didn't know either until I tried it, saw it for myself. That's what aging can do.
Absolutely. And this is I'll tease a little bit. This is something I was going to talk a little bit more about with Pete later on, which is while we were up visiting, we got to do this blending experiment. It was about the 1928, and I'll go into a little bit more with detail with Pete here, but a little bit later rather. But it's worth mentioning because we got to play with, I think it was 7 vintages, either 7 or 8. And the way the 1928 is constructed, if you haven't had it yet, it's 60% rye, 30% Calvados, and then 10% Armagnac. And what we got to do was to play around with those vintages of Armagnac in a chemistry lab setting, which was fantastic, and with pipettes and graduated cylinders. And you have to remember that we could use one, we could use all 7, any number in between. The percentages just had to be, I think, I don't know, maybe a quarter, like 2.5 or something like that. It had to be an easy enough percentage that you could do with the eye. And what was most fascinating about it was that you're only dealing with 10% of the overall blend. And within that 10%, I think the one that I went with had 4 vintages in there. And each of them were so different. They were very much snapshots in time of different eras of Armagnac, different years, different seasons, even. And the reason I bring this up too is to your point about having these the vintages. We don't see that very much. We don't in the whiskey world. It's almost unheard of. We see it a little bit in the rum world, but in whiskey, I mean, I can think of Balblair did it for a while, and I think they've given it up. Aaron did it a little bit, I believe, but I mean, the point is that the people doing that style, the vintage model, can be counted on one hand. And it's further complicated by the fact that unless you're using one season of grain or one farm, it can be difficult to really get those snapshots in other spirits in the same way that you can with an Armagnac. A couple of exceptions, of course, being like a bottled and bond or something like that. So with the Armagnac, thankfully you guys had my year too. You had 92, which got to drink a bunch of while we were up there. But one of my friends who was there, Kurt, and I bring this up as an example of how the vintage system can both work and showcase the product. You actually don't have his birth year. It's one of the few in the 70s that you don't have, and it's because that particular year, I don't remember which one it was, but there was a terrible drought across the region. And so just either no Armagnac was produced, there weren't enough extra grapes. A lot of things happened where, Dubayron just does not have, and now Bhakta just does not have that vintage. And to me, that makes it even more intriguing to really look at these as a year by year project. And one more nerdy thing to throw in there as well with the chemistry aspect of it is you're dealing with different wood from year to year. The wood from 1868, Quercus robur, Quercus petraea, European French oak, whichever may have been used, is not the same year to year. It's going to be a very tight grain, more so than we see with American oak or others like Musonara. It's going to have that slower capillary action, slow growth, and it gives such a different flavor, especially too when, as we're saying, it's toasted, not charred. The toast levels can shift a little bit. So these are if you look at whether it's 1868, 1888, 1941, 1962, 73, and all the way up to 97 and early 2000s, these are snapshots, and it's something to be appreciated. So that's my rant on that topic.
Oh, I love to hear it. I mean, that's why we're doing this, David. Whether you talk about, with Pete, or it's that's the point. Better or worse is not the discussion. It's different. Now, why is it different? I was a part of a tasting, it was last Tuesday or Wednesday. We were tasting some whiskeys, some 10-year-old whiskeys. And I found Raj, yeah, I'll tell you, it was Whistlepig. We were tasting some 10-year-old Whistlepig, and we were tasting the current release versus this bottle that I found in Massachusetts that was what I think, and Raj confirmed, was there when I was working at Whistlepig. I thought the label looked right. It was like a dusty bottle, and one of the clients had it, and I was like, can I buy this for Raj? This is so cool. Like, I want to taste it against, this other whiskey. And so I finally got to taste this. This is a bottle I bought like 6 months ago, but it was on the table. And I'm like, wait, can we taste this? Like, I want to taste it with you. Is that the bottle? And he's like, yeah, that's the bottle you bought. It's like this pickle juice, I think is what he said. And we were tasting like the Whistlepig 10-year today versus that one, and they were wildly different. And then sure enough, this one had like this pickly flavor that was delicious. But I'm like, that's crazy. That was circa, 2017-ish. And this is the modern day one. Again, better or worse, that's not the conversation. We just wanted to taste the differences of them. And that's, why we're putting out, these age statements with our new products, right? We've done two bourbon releases, and we put the vintage on them so that we can trace them back. Okay, that was MGP juice that was aged for 9 years, 6 months, finished in the Bhakta 50 casks, whereas this one's aged for 9 years, also comes from MGP, produced in a different year, though, right? To your point, looking at what's going on in the air, temperatures, history. The world wars have went down, and they're still producing Armagnac, in some of our collections. Think of the 40s. That's World War II's kicking, and they're still producing Armagnac. God bless their souls. Thank you for doing it. Like, they kept it going. And for all of our products, that's what we're trying to do, and it's been a very fun journey to be a part of, and kind of see how we've taken what they've always done in Armagnac and transitioned that into the new spirits that we're releasing as times have gone on.
I think that puts a really great segue into a line of questioning I hadn't really thought of, but I want to explore. And this is one, by the way, if you don't feel comfortable, let me know. But so because you know Raj so well, you've gotten to know him so well over the last few years, as from intern to minister. The Raj has a persona of from this time at Whistlepig of ingenuity, innovation, rashness too. And then some of the stories earlier, you were saying, he's still got that creative drive, that he's always looking for something new, something cool, something different. As you've known him, and I think this plays into just the journey of Bhakta spirits as well, what have you seen in him that has either changed or remained constant over the years as this new project goes off the ground?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We'll let the PR boys give the thumbs up or thumbs down on this one.
Fair enough.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, what is stuck with Raj? I mean, the one of my favorite things about Raj, and this has stuck with me, is his hunger to learn. And I think that is a good place, or a good base, if you will, of this kind of wild character we have of Raj, right? Created a successful whiskey company, had enough money to go buy an island, sit on the beach for his rest of his life, smoking cigars, drinking whiskey with his feet up and his beautiful family, right? But that's not what he wanted to do. He's like, all right, what's next? Let me go learn about what's out there. Let me go learn about Armagnac. Let me go see what's in Canada. And I learned that there is now this, 1,500 bottles of a Jamaican rum that I need to have, and I don't know exactly what I'm going to do with it. I know I have to have it. Let me go learn about what spirits are being produced in Scotland or in Ireland or in Japan or in so much so we went down to Colombia to go look at the spirit called Viche. Viche is a
Mm.
sugarcane based spirit. It's like a kind of like an agricole rum. But I remember I got this call was it last year, maybe the year before? He's like, hey, like we're taking our tradesman program, which is our like club, if you will, for bartenders and people in the booze industry. He's like, we're gonna go take him to look at this company, this spirit called Viche, and we're gonna see if it's viable. I'm like, what's Viche? He's like, we're gonna go learn all about it. And then we get there, and we've got to take a plane to Medellin, and take a plane to the coast of Colombia, and then take a bus to the actual beach where we load all of our stuff up on a boat, and then we take a 2-hour boat ride to this other part of the coast where we're throwing our suitcases to the gentlemen on the beach that have wheelbarrows that are catching them, and we're diving into the water. The following day we go pick up a distiller who's got a machete in his hand and he's waiting on the beach. We pick him up on a boat. Next thing you know, an hour later, we've trudged through the jungle and we're in this wild sugarcane field, right? Harvesting sugarcane to be brought back by hand. We're helping him out back by hand to then go, and watch him hand juice everything. Not just, we're in modern days and they're hand pressing. It takes 3 people to hand press sugarcane on this like giant device, and then just to see what they're doing. And we're learning about this. Like, is it viable? Is it, how could we sell this? Could we put it in a cocktail? What flavors would the Americans like? What would they not like? What kind of volume can we get out of this? And I think that hunger for learning really drives Raj's I don't know exactly the word I'm looking here for, but draws the excitement for life, maybe. But one of the things that really drives him, when he bought this college campus, he spent time here to learn about it, to talk to the people, spent time just to learn about the culture, the town. Like, we haven't dove into this college campus that I'm sitting on here today, even though it looks like I'm in outer space on this podcast. It's that thing to that's what drives him, is this never ending hunger to learn what's out there and what possibilities are. And so much so that people say, oh, you can't do that. Well, I'm going to learn and I'm going to figure out a way that I can, right? Even though you said you couldn't do that, I'm still going to figure out a way that you can. And that to me has been one of, I will use the word beautiful, one of the most beautiful things I've noticed in a professional and a personal, on like a professional and a personal, relationship with Raj, or development, if you will. There's always a will. If there's a will, there's a way. And if you're hungry enough to learn about it, then you can become an expert in it. And always continue to just see what's out there. And I think that's really what drives this like spark that I see in Raj's eyes.
I could see that. And Raj, for people who may not have been, fans or listeners of the Whiskey Ring podcast this long, Raj was an early guest on the podcast. I did not think I was going to get him on, and I connected, and he said, "Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk." And it all came out of I was sitting in a center here in Queens waiting, I think, to get my first COVID vaccination right when they had come out. And at the time, the Bhakta 50 series was on number 8. And I was sitting there and it came up on Flaviar, which I was a member of at the time. And I was just like, 50-year-old spirit. It's finished in Isla casks. It's like, I think it was maybe $400. And I was like, this feels like something to take a chance on, because what else are you going to get of anything that's 50 years old and is $400 and could be really good? And if not, like I it's like we're all home with COVID, we're all inside and depressed, and and
Right.
needs things to
Minimum
do.
of 50 years old too. Minimum.
Right, minimum of 50 years old. So I was like, at that point, it's not really that much of a risk. So I got it and I tried it and I really enjoyed it. It was interesting. I started looking it up, looking up more information about it, about the background, reached out to him, and there we go. He's on an episode the next week. And he it was really funny because I had, of course, in the course of doing research for that episode, knew about a little bit about the Whistlepig departure. I learned more about it, and but I think when I finally met him, he wasn't what I expected, and he was this gregarious, outgoing, constant ideas, boom, 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 but also so welcoming of new questions. I mean, I had never had Armagnac before. I think that was my first Armagnac. And I didn't know the category. I really wasn't that into Isla Scotches at that point either. So we got two things that I didn't know about or didn't really like coming together to get this product that was delicious and new and exciting. And I keep looking back to that because that excitement that exudes from not just Raj, but I think he's done a great job of choosing a team, yourself included. Also, shout out to the people I'm going to be talking to later, Pete, to Morgan, and everyone else who's on the trip up there, who just exude that excitement about what's going on. And while you think it could be easy to be excited about spirits that are 150 years old, 3 years after the Civil War ended and the reign of Napoleon III, it says something that he's able to attract and collect this group of people who can then take that vision, take that excitement, and repurpose it in their own way, like we're doing today, into interviews, uh, trade journeys, all of these different things that finally will get to the consumer. So I think with that, I wanted to turn just the last 20 minutes or so that we've got to, yeah, what we've got going on now. So in your role as Minister of Time, you're we
Master.
like I said, we master. I'm sorry. Did I say minister or master?
It-
Is it
uh,
master?
Technically it's master, but
It
if
is
you want to
master.
use
Okay.
minister, we can use minister for the purpose of this call.
Oh no, that master is fine. I think I said minister earlier, so I so
No,
yes,
you're good.
master of time. I wanted to take a step back and say, what is your scope of work today?
Yeah, that's right now it's predominantly in a sales focused role. David, I'll tell you one of the reasons my title is Master of Time, which for our listeners, if you think about what we've got, we're selling time in a bottle, right? We've got, David was just talking about Napoleon. We could talk about, President Lincoln and, him being alive when things were being distilled, or, the trees being planted prior to him even existing. We've got time in a bottle. And so, one day, I deemed myself the master of time. But anyways, the other piece, right? I do sell time in a bottle, but the other piece is I've went on this journey with Raj, and so after meeting him at Whistlepig, going on this tour with him to France, and then joining the company in 2020 when we launched and started out with Bhakta 50, this esoteric, Armagnac blend that's finished in an Isla whiskey cask. To at that time I was Raj's chief of staff. They call it the aide de camp role, which is a military term, but you're basically Raj's chief of staff at the time. And we kind of kept going and kept going. And then Raj said, "Hey, JP, I need you to move down to Florida and launch that market, get Georgia up and running." So I moved down to Florida, and I was, if you want to think more traditional title, sales manager or territory specialist. So I had Florida and Georgia. I was running those two markets. Now, while that was happening, Raj also purchased this college campus, which is an interesting story on how this came to be. But basically one day, this co-founder and friend Leo emailed him this link to an old college campus that had went up for sale, and Raj was like, "I think we've got something here. I think we're going to create something really, really cool here. He called me. He's like, don't let anybody talk to me today. I'm going down to this college. Then the next day he says, don't let anybody talk to me again today because I think we've got something. And he starts with these ideas about, an educational facility for the spirits industry, to a destination that we can put boutique hotels at, to a place for people to produce and have a place of production on not just booze front, but maybe, some of the more specialized items like honey and um, maple syrup and barrel production, and maybe we'll do a stone ground product of some sort. But it was just this all-encompassing destination spirits wonderland, really cool piece. While that's being put together, then he's like, hey, come back here. I need you to launch this hospitality program for us. We've got this beautiful, crazy campus. Now we need to show people that we have it. So I moved back up to Vermont at that point, where I was like a sales manager, if you will. And I launched our hospitality program that we started, and a couple of colleagues, Morgan French being one of them, has continued to run this program. To now a little bit more of like again, I'm now another sales manager. So I live in Boston currently. I cover Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Vermont, New York, excluding Metro. We'll be picking up Georgia here soon, and New Jersey. I've been up here for a week training our new sales force. I help out with like I'm on the product tasting panel before we'll release products. It goes through a slew of internal things. So I'm on that front. And so much so that I've even pitched Raj ideas on particular products. I just got back from Mexico. I was in the mezcal region, if you will, down in Oaxaca, looking at some cool things. And I'm like, Raj, I found the best juice I've ever had in my entire life. He's like, all right, how's the story? How's the product? How's the pricing? Like, let's look at the thing. And I'm like, all right, let me get all that stuff over to you so we could start evaluating whether this is going to fit in, Raj's wells of vintage spirits. Now, hopefully it does. We'll see. That's a story for another time. But, I've really get to play a bit of a role in everything. I can't remember why I was up here when you and I met, but it was, hey, JP, join in. Let's have some fun with the hospitality guests. So truly for Raj, I'm his right-hand man. Anything he needs, I can get done. And that's one of the other qualities that I really love about Raj. A little, anecdote on this, but if there is a will, there is a way. And Raj has instilled that within me over the course of, our relationship. And it's professionally and personally, that's one of the biggest things that is my biggest takeaway from Raj, is if there's a will and it's a way. And of course that's corny and people know it's a saying, but with Raj, he means it. And again, it just, any task that Raj gives me, I'll figure out. And if not, it's exhausted because I ran through 1,000 situations of why it can and cannot work. Which has been a little bit of fun.
And going to the college campus itself, again, funny aside to this, my wife and I are huge Family Guy fans. That's half of our language. And in one episode in the mid 2010s, I believe, Meg is supposed to go to college, and her interview is with Green Mountain College in Vermont.
No way.
And she misses the interview because she and Peter get just blackout drunk and like miss the whole thing. And eventually she gets to go and all that. But and then the storyline kind of drops. We never hear of it again. But I'm going up. I'm prepping for this trip in February, and I'm thinking to myself, I know I've heard Green Mountain College before. Like, it's not, yes, it's a small college. I had read up, I knew it had closed, and then obviously Raj purchased it to repurpose it. But I was like, I don't know why else I know this. And then suddenly we're rewatching again, and that episode comes up, and I'm like, holy crap, that's why I'm there. So it was a weird coincidence that happened. but the campus itself is gorgeous, and just as the Armagnacs are, it's a snapshot in time. You go there, and it's almost like in that case it was winter break. Like students had gone home, campus is quiet, but it looks like for all intents and purposes, in a couple of weeks everyone could come back, restart the schooling program, get back in the classrooms, turn the lights on, and boom, it's back to running like at a college campus. And that can be both really inspiring. It can also give off a little The Last of Us vibes. I'm not going to lie, for going into the basement of some of the buildings. But it was so much fun because of it. It was exciting. And
As
I
someone,
hope the
sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I hope the hospitality team and the PR team are okay with me making that comparison. I mean it in a good, fun, exciting way, and not in a like, there's fungus everywhere. That's not the case. It was more
No,
exciting.
no,
So,
definitely not, definitely. Well, maybe some fungus on the.
I mean, you can't look everywhere, but yeah.
Exactly. You can't look everywhere. But no, I hear you, David. As someone who has lived on this college campus, it's over 550 acres, 20 something odd buildings, over 500,000 square feet of indoor space. I've lived here alone, like in my own dorm building. When Raj first bought this place, when the sale finally went through, I remember we had like a barbecue the first day. And he's like, "Are you surprised that I bought this thing?" I said, "No, not really. I've known you for a little while. When you told me you wanted it, I figured you were going to go get it, and here we are, and you own it." I'll tell you a funny story. On the first day I moved here, I remember I was showing one of our new summer interns around. I was showing him the farm, which is about 30 minutes from here. We're working on some like production and whatnot there. We've got like a vineyard planted. We'll do some grain out there eventually. You could talk to Pete about that one. Um, Raj comes barreling down the road in his Thunderbird. I'm in the car with an intern, and he's like, "Guys, guys, 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 guys." He's like, "JP, there's people on campus. Apparently all hell is breaking loose. The accountant said there were people on campus. We don't know what's going on down there. I need you to get down there and move in tonight. Who's that?" It's like, "Oh, that's Alex Thompson. He's our new intern for the summer." He's like, "Oh, perfect. Have you ever done security, sir?" And we like looked at him and we're like, "No." So well, basically, you sleep for an hour, you guard for an hour, you sleep for an hour, you guard for an hour, and you guys just go back and forth until you get there, till morning. And we're like, sure. He's like, "You just pick a building and stay in it." So we moved in, and I'm staying in a building, 4 floors and a basement, all alone in like the RA suite with the chirping going off, beep 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 beep, beep from the old fire alarms. But yeah, it felt a little haunted, maybe. The Shining,
Mhm.
uh, the piece where everybody goes poof in the Avengers. But yeah, it was a little freaky at first, and then you kind of got accustomed to it. Now I can walk around with the lights off, no issue.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, you're spot on. It can be a little spooky sometimes, which makes for a fun ghost tour at night, though.
It does, and it's a testament to the hospitality team as well, that of how much work has been put in over not only just to set up, but over consecutive rounds of visitation, feedback, that the buildings that are in use are set up to be in use. And if they're a little more bare, like I think of the um where we tried the rum, it was in the old art building.
Okay.
And less had been done, quote unquote, done to renovate, but it was usable. And the point of the building was to show what the campus had been, to show the even down to the chairs that were still there, that there was a purpose to each of these things, and that you want to show what the vision was for the future, starting with buildings like that were semi to mostly empty and didn't necessarily have a purpose yet. like the chemistry lab had a purpose because that's where the blending labs are happening. The library has been repurposed into what I think is a beautiful idea, of having storage in there and etc. Uh, so, and obviously the mess hall and the dining room being, it's meant to be a dining room. It's
Right.
like that. So having all of that potential really struck me, and so I wanted to kind of, I mean, I think we could talk for much more than we already have, but just being considerate of your time, uh, I'd love to hear from your perspective since you've been here from the beginning with Bhakta and then even before so with Raj, where you think the vision is going and what do you think the next phase is?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And quick side note on that particular building. It's funny you mentioned the art building. So that one is in repurpose mode right now.
Oh,
So when you saw it last, remember what you saw. And when you come here next, think about what's changed. Right now, we've just cleared out the full bottom facility. We're cleaning it up. Morgan is a metal worker. She also
mhm.
has a friend that does some like glass blowing and stuff, and then some ceramic work. So a new cool activity or piece that the art building will turn into is a place where you can go create stuff. So maybe you'll be able to make your own bar spoon when you come to campus, or your own custom glass, or your own custom, a ceramic cup. You never really know. And that just, again, adds to, what's next, what's next, what's next. And to answer your question, um, it's, hmm, what's next? I mean, the possibilities are really endless. As someone who's been with Raj, for a while now, you never really know what's next. When I knew I was joining the company back in 2019, early 2020, I thought we were going to be living on a farm, split between Florida and Vermont, producing spirits and selling spirits and blending spirits. 6 months after I joined the team, a college campus goes up for sale, and now Raj buys it. Um, so the question's a little difficult for me to answer. To be honest with you, I think your next conversation is going to give a good will give some good light on that, if you will, because when I look at what's next, it's an empty slate. It could be anything. I know we've got plans for blended whiskeys. I know we've got plans for other brands. I know we've got plans for other categories. I mean, shoot, we have a boutique hotel coming up. So, where this thing can go, I mean, I'll spitball you with, it could be tequila. It could be, we've got a rum distillery that we're working on down in Florida. We've got other whiskey brands that are coming out. We've got an educational program that we're working on for people in the spirits industry and the hospitality industry. That's what we're building with our current sales team so that we can hopefully create that for, anybody that exists that wants to learn about the spirits industry as a whole. But what do we do best? We know good spirits. We know good hospitality. Um, and when you bring those two together, the possibilities are endless. And maybe that's in the traditional spirit sense where we're producing some killer bottles, or inviting guests like yourself to our college campus in the middle of nowhere to show you a good time and an interesting time. It could be putting you up in our boutique hotel, that's got vintage dated rooms where one day you're staying in the 1800s and the next one you're in, your Great Gatsby in the 20s. It could be that. It could be, shoot, we could end up in another country together, when we're working on, another release for another product, another continent per se, working on global scales. So because it's really endless. In one word, it'll be innovative. I know that.
Sure. I wrote it down on my list. I will be sure to ask him about it. And I think if there's a way to encompass the ethos that you've just described, it's very much the Danny Meyer model of people come for the food. Danny Meyer being a restaurateur, entrepreneur in food, and people come for the food the first time. They come back for the experience and the service. And I can personally say, having gone, this is not blowing smoke, that yes, the Armagnacs, the rums, the bourbons and ryes were fantastic, but being there with friends, with new friends that we met, people that I knew only online, if I had heard of them at all, plus the team itself, is the reason to come back and to keep paying attention to where Bhakta Spirits is going and where the Griswold campus is going. So,
yeah, I know. I like that. I like that. The spirits are what draw you in. The possibilities are endless, and the experiences, maybe not. No, it doesn't. Spirits are what draw you in. Yeah. No, sorry. Continue.
No, it works.
Think of something fun to end with.
We can always, there's always room with that. But I think, given the conversation, the best way to end it is with that the possibilities are endless, that we'll have more conversations in the future, that there's more to talk about coming down the road, 3, 6, 12 months, 5 years from now, who knows? But that there seems like there will always be something new and interesting coming from it.
It started with you buying a bottle of Bhakta 50, which again, for our listeners, is about as esoteric as you can get. It's 8 single vintage Armagnacs that date from 1868 to 1970 that were finished in an Isla whiskey barrel, right? A 38 single barrel release, something just totally kind of out there, crazy age statements, beautiful spirits, a bridge from whiskey into Armagnac and vice versa. And here we are months later, and now so it started with Armagnac, and then it brought you to a college campus, and now we're tasting whiskeys and different vintage spirits. So who knows what's going to be next? Maybe we ask Pete. Maybe we ask Raj. I don't know.
Always a possibility. Well, JP, thank you really so much for taking the time today. I really appreciate it. I love this conversation. It was so much fun. I hope you had as much fun as I did.
Absolutely, David. Always a pleasure talking. I was excited when they asked, if they were like, "Hey, will you be on David Levine's podcast?" I was like, "Oh yeah, I know him. I know him." So it's great to see you again. I hope you can come back up here soon, and if not, if you find yourself in Boston, you let me know. And I'd love to show you a good time there as well.
Will do. Hang on with me for just 1 second after recording. I got one short question I want to ask you off air. But thank you again to JP and to the Bhakta team for helping to set this up. This has been another episode of the Whiskering Podcast, and I will see you very shortly. Hey folks, thanks for listening to another episode of the Whiskering Podcast. If you like what you hear, please go ahead and click that subscribe, follow, or like button. Leave a rating and review on your podcast app of choice, and let me know what you want to hear. You can reach out to me through the podcast apps or email me at david@whiskeymyweddingring.com with any suggestions or ideas for new show guests. You can also support the podcast at patreon.com/whiskeymyweddingring. That's whiskey with an E, for as little as $1 a month. $5 a month gets you access to bonus content, including our soon-to-resume Under the Influencer series, and $25 a month means you join the Barrel Share Club. Each month, Barrel Share Club members get to try products sent to me for review, bottles from my own collection, and sometimes bottles that I just pick up because they're fun or interesting. Right now, only 5 spots remain in the Barrel Share Club, so grab your place today. Finally, please follow on Instagram. You can follow me at Whiskey My Wedding Ring or at Whiskering Podcast. You can follow me on Twitter at Whiskering. You can follow on Facebook at Whiskey My Wedding Ring or join the Facebook group, the Whiskey Ringers group. And I hope to see you there. Cheers, thank you for the support, and see you next time.